We want to welcome everybody out there that is watching us via live stream. Today is World Gorilla Day that we already celebrate on the 24th of September every year. Today we are celebrating being Gorilla Champion. Our theme is I am a Gorilla Champion. And we are trying to have some questions to one of the most popular or world-renowned veterinarian, right? Did I pronounce that right, Doctor?
Yes, you did.
yeah, Dr. Gladys. Dr. Gladys is the founder and CEO of Conservation Through Public Health. She is Uganda's first wildlife veterinary officer. She has won the Whitley Gold Award for her conservation work. She was profiled by the BBC in a documentary called Gladys, the African Vet. In 2021, she was nominated to the list of 100 most influential African women, a stage that she shared with other notable figures like Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is the president of Tanzania, and Her Excellency Saleh Work, the president of Ethiopia. And in 2021 again, she was proclaimed by the United Nations Environment Program as a champion of the earth. Welcome, Dr. Gladys, to this live stream.
Thank you, Conan. Very excited to be here and to be interviewed by you.
Okay. So we just really wanted to not keep our viewers waiting. We wanted you to tell us about mountain gorillas and why they are considered endangered.
Mountain gorillas are considered endangered because there's only mountain gorillas actually used to be critically endangered, but recently they were removed from the critically endangered list. There's only just over 1,000 left in the world, and even if there's only just 1,000 individuals, a minimum of 1,063 since the census of 2018. They are still very few in number and they're endangered. And you may wonder why they were removed from the critically endangered list, and yet there's just only over 1,000 individuals. And the reason is because they've been showing a positive growth trend since over the past 25 years. 1997, I participated in the first gorilla census at Bwindi in Pentrebo National Park, and we counted 300 gorillas. This was after 350 had been counted in the Virungas. The mountain gorillas are found in two isolated populations. One of them is the Virunga volcanoes, which was the very first discovered population. And then the Bwindi Pentrebo National Park population, which was discovered in the late 1980s. So in 1997, there were only 650 mountain gorillas left in the world. And now in 2018, 20 years later, it went up to 1,063. So they almost doubled over the past 20 years. And now I believe that the numbers are continuing to grow. So because they have been showing a positive growth trend, the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, moved them from critically endangered to endangered. Unlike other gorilla subspecies, which are still critically endangered, because their populations are going down, even if some of them are in much larger numbers than the mountain gorillas.
Okay, so does that mean that you are optimistic? Because I know that much as you are working on the conservation of mountain gorillas, it is not a walk in the park. It's not that you can one day rest and say, hey, I've retired. We no longer need work. We no longer need to do any more work about the mountain gorillas. Are you optimistic when you see the gorillas in their habitat and then increasing populations, and then you see all these things that are happening in the world? Recently we had COVID, stuff like that. Are you optimistic? How do you feel about the future of mountain gorillas?
I'm optimistic about the future of mountain gorillas because they're showing a positive growth trend. And the mountain gorillas are contributing so much to everyone. Everybody's benefiting from the mountain gorillas at the moment. The local communities who share their habitat, that's the most important target group, is now seeing the gorillas as their future. So if gorillas go into their gardens, they don't kill them. Instead, they call the gorilla guardians to herd them back. We commonly call them the human gorilla conflict team. And the reason why they do this is because they're benefiting from having the gorillas nearby. They're helping to lift them out of poverty through gorilla tourism, but also through other engagement of other NGO programs. Some NGOs are improving their livelihoods, others are improving their health, and our organization, Conservation Through Public Health, was set up to improve the health of the people because people are making gorillas sick. But we're also improving the livelihoods of the gorillas through gorilla conservation coffee, the livelihoods of the communities to share their habitat. So all these benefits that the communities are benefiting from means that the gorillas have a secure future. But however, COVID is something that really affected the gorillas because it affected them mainly indirectly because tourism went down and people no longer had that revenue from tourism, so they started poaching. And unfortunately, we lost a gorilla, a silverback gorilla of Nkuringo gorilla group, Rafiki, to a hungry bushmeat poacher. But however, other reason why COVID was an issue that we have to worry about is because gorillas can easily pick up COVID and other diseases. And we're very concerned that this was going to really affect them. And because they've ever picked up common flu viruses from people, and so have the chimpanzees, we're worried that COVID, which is even more contagious, could result in something like that. So that has been another reason why we've been very concerned about, we've not been, and also one thing that we did is to help to make sure that everybody wears masks when they go close to the mountain gorillas. And that is really being instituted. Even in the front page of New Vision today, they're showing people wearing masks, even if the gorillas go too close to them. But that's very important. In that way, we stop them from picking up all kinds of diseases that they could get from us. And the mask wearing is going to continue in the future. We actually launched a policy brief about this, and I think I'll talk about it more in the interview.
Okay. So speaking of conservation through public health, the organization that you founded, that is a very particular name, like conservation through public health. I mean, why did you choose that approach to the conservation, and why did you center the structure that was going to be the machine with which you put out your conservation effort through that approach? Why is that conservation through public health, and why public health?
Yes, conservation through public health was started based on experiences I had working as a first veterinarian for the Uganda Wildlife Authority when gorillas picked up a disease called scabies from the local community, which was traced to people living around the park who had very little health care. And they got it when they went to forage in their banana plantations, and they found people had put dirty clothing on scarecrows to scare away gorillas and other wildlife. So the gorillas picked up scabies. It's a very contagious disease. Even in developed countries, it's very difficult to get rid of. And so you can imagine in poor, where people have poor hygiene, they're not washing their clothes often, they're not bathing often. The mites remained on the clothing. When the gorillas touched the clothing, it spread through the group, and a big gorilla died, and the others only recovered when we treated them with ivermectin.
Okay.
So I started to think to myself that it would be very difficult to keep the gorillas healthy if the people living around them have poor health and hygiene, and this was going to affect the future of the gorillas. So eventually we founded Conservation Through Public Health in 2003, together with my husband, Kalema-Zikusoka, who's a telecom expert, and Stephen Rubanga, a veterinary technician who was working with the Ministry of Agriculture. And what CTPH does is improves the health of the people, the gorillas, and other wildlife together. And on top of also improving the community livestock, because they can also be a source of disease for the wildlife, or the wildlife can spread disease to the community. And then we also improve the well-being. Later on, we found that many people are unhealthy because they're poor, and we started to improve their well-being through gorilla conservation and other livelihood options.
All right. But then that brings again the question, I mean, human beings are always in touch with various animals. We even have some animals that are in our homes and all that. Why is it that for the gorillas in particular, just about everything from us can easily jump onto them and vice versa? Why in particular?
Why in particular is because we are very closely related. We share 98% genetic material and can easily make each other sick. So in fact, right now we have an Ebola outbreak in Uganda, The western lowland gorillas in Central Africa, many of them, in fact, the reason why they're still critically endangered, although there's over 100,000 western lowland gorillas estimated, is because Ebola has devastated them. You know, they've died of Ebola. Over 5,000 gorillas have died of Ebola in the past 20 years. And people, whoever ate these gorillas, because some people eat them as bushmeat, died of Ebola immediately, and so did their families. So we can easily pick up diseases like Ebola, like anthrax from wildlife, and it can easily spread within our families. And so because we're so closely related, it's even more likely. So a disease like scabies, for example, which if I picked up scabies from your dog or your cat, it would just be a temporary infection. But because people and gorillas are so closely related, and it's a naive host from a parasite from a closely related host, it was very easy for it to spread back and forth. And in fact, something like SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, we found that human beings, great apes, of which we're also a great ape, actually, but the other great apes like the gorillas, the chimpanzees, orangutans, and old world primates like baboons, vervet monkeys, those kind of monkeys, we all share the same protein receptor. There's ACE2 protein receptor, of which the virus easily attaches to, which means that the way that COVID makes people sick would make primates sick. And that was seen actually during the pandemic.
Oh, wow, that's very informative. That's very informative. So, Doctor, you have worked with gorillas for a very long time. You have developed this attachment. Whenever you're talking about gorillas, you're passionate. What makes them special to you? What makes gorillas so special to you? And why should people treat them as being special?
Gorillas to me are so special because the first time I met them as a vet student, that very day we only saw one gorilla called Kachipira. He was called Kachipira because he had a broken hand. When he looked at me and I stared at him, I felt a deep connection. And I realized that we are so similar to each other at that point in time. But then I got to meet all the rest of the gorillas that were habituated at the time, Mubare and Katendejere, and I saw so many different things about them, their behavior, which was so similar to humans. You know, for example, babies, the way they play is how human babies play. Now that I've got two sons, I've seen that they play exactly like they used to play like the gorillas do. The mothers carry the babies on their back. The mothers stay with their babies for a long time until they're independent. In fact, they'll be with a baby for 4 years and until it's old enough to build its nest, and then they'll have another baby. So they're much better than us at planning their families. I actually planned our family the same way. Our boys are 4.5 years apart. But the gorillas are so similar. They're very gentle, actually. They're more gentle than human beings, and it's very relaxing when you're with them. But also I got so attached to them because I realized that they're just so few in number. And if we didn't do anything, they could actually become extinct. And it would be a very big loss to everybody.
Oh, wow. Okay. So all this, what would you say? What would you say through your experience with conservation work when it comes to gorillas? What has been like the lesson that you've gotten out of it? What has been like an important lesson that you can say you got from your work of conservation?
Well, one of the most important lessons I've learned is that it's impossible to protect endangered species like gorillas and many others. Could be elephants, chimpanzees, could be lions, all kinds of species. It's very difficult to protect these species without engaging the local communities. And it's very difficult to protect them without improving community health and well-being, particularly for the species that are closely related to us, like the gorillas and chimpanzees. But if community well-being is not catered for, it's very difficult to protect the wildlife. The communities are partners in wildlife, and now it's moving. Now everybody's going a step further from saying community-based conservation to community-led conservation. Let them become the champions, and then let them feel that these species are their future, and then they'll survive forever. And that's, I think, what conservationists need to focus on, letting communities lead conservation efforts And this not only amongst the NGOs, but the government, the private sector, everyone should engage communities more meaningfully so that they lead the efforts. And all we're doing is to supporting them, encouraging them, and training them, because they have to coexist. They are the neighbors of this wildlife. They've been the neighbors centuries behind. And now we're trying to tell them, that this wildlife is just for a certain set of people. That won't work. So it's very important to engage local communities. And also, one thing I've learned is taking care of wildlife it's a global good, I have to say, because the tourists who come to visit, they really, really enjoy visiting the gorillas and other species, and they themselves are helping to sustain the existence of these very important species. And so engaging the global community to look after them is another way of sustaining conservation. And this has been very obvious to the mountain gorillas, because mountain gorilla tourism is now contributing quite a lot, over 50% of the revenue for the Uganda Wildlife Authority, for the Rwanda Development Board. And if tourism is done right, where tourists can come in and they make sure that it's responsible tourism is done, where communities also benefit, then it can have very great gains for conservation and poverty alleviation as well.
Okay. So speaking of communities, especially concentrating on the park edge communities, when we were earlier on in the interview, you showed us a packet for gorilla coffee. And I understand that's one of the initiatives that you have also started. What have you been trying to do with gorilla conservation coffee, and how does it relate to the conservation effort of mountain gorillas?
Gorilla conservation coffee we started it because whenever it's a social enterprise that we began, which we felt that could help to protect the gorillas as well. Because whenever I check on the gorillas, often cross coffee farms, and we found out that these coffee farmers were not getting a steady market or a fair price from coffee. And yet they are seeing tourists every day. And a lot of tourists, they stop and tell them, this is a coffee tree, this is a Arabica tree, Robusta tree, and they all get excited because the only time they see coffee is in a supermarket. And so through Gorilla Conservation Coffee, we're able to train those farmers to grow good coffee, which is very likely in Bwindi because it's a high altitude. And so even the coffee that we get from there ends up being among the best in the world, which is very good. And so we offer them a good price for good coffee, and a donation from every bag sold goes to support community health, gorilla health, and conservation education. And in this way, we're reducing the community's need to poach and collect firewood, because it takes them a while to grow good coffee. And if they know they're going to get a good price, there's no need for them to enter the park to hunt when they need meat. They can actually have enough money from coffee and buy the meat. So this is, we're building a global coffee brand to save gorillas one sip at a time. And it's been operating for 6 years now, and we're making a lot of progress.
Oh, okay. That's nice. That's very nice. So today,
500 farmers around the park through 25 farmers, and we're able to sell the coffee in Uganda to gorilla trekking tourists, to other kind of tourists in the lodges all over Uganda, at the Gorilla Conservation Cafe in Entebbe, and then Entebbe duty free. They place an order every week. But then it's also being sold in Kenya, at Carrefour supermarket, high-end supermarket in Kenya, through Safari Lounge. And it's also being sold in New Zealand online, and in UK online with Money Row Beans, and in US online with gccoffeeus.com. So those are the most consistent markets, but we've also ever had it sold in South Africa and France and Switzerland and Australia. There's a big interest in gorilla conservation coffee.
Okay, that's amazing. So today we are saying I'm a gorilla champion. We are trying to get people to know more about conservation of mountain gorillas. What's like for the person right there who's just watching us right now, probably is getting to learn about the conservation work with mountain gorillas. What can they do to be a part of this? What can they do to be a part of this, either directly or maybe support a person who, or an organization like CTPH, which is already involved and has a structure? What can somebody do?
To be a gorilla champion, means that you can do so many things. You don't only have to have a career in conservation, but you can spread the word through social media. My son Tendo, for example, he's very good in Instagram. Actually, he prides himself on having almost as many followers as his mama, Tendo. So
I don't know.
Tendo, how are you a gorilla champion? How are you a gorilla champion?
Tendo is an Instagram star.
Yeah. How are you a gorilla champion? One time you wrote an article on gorillas in Toto magazine. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was just like the title of the article was called Gorillas on COVID-19.
Oh, wow.
By the time, like, COVID was a lot, so my mom told me about writing an article for the gorillas. So I decided it's a good idea.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice. That's nice. Wow.
Highlighting the threat.
Okay.
Yes. And people, like today, what people have done is the Wildlife Education Center has so generously allowed us to join them for this big day and celebrate with them. And lots of games and quizzes, and children from all over Uganda have been here from different schools, and they've learned a lot about gorillas. So we're going to work in a partnership with UX so that there's information about gorillas all through the year, and maybe next year have a bigger celebration for World Gorilla Day. You can visit them in the national parks if you're able to, as long as you're years and over. You can share all the posts about gorillas on social media, create your own posts, become a gorilla champion in that way. You can also buy gorilla conservation coffee, so you can save gorillas one time wherever you are in the world. A lot of gorilla conservation coffee is available in UK, US, New Zealand, Australia, Kenya, Uganda. And all these ways you can become a gorilla champion. You can also read my forthcoming book, which is coming out in December about my conservation, called Walking with.
I wanted to ask you about that, to tell us about the book, because I understand that there is an upcoming book, so tell us more about this book and what to look for without so many spoilers.
The book is about my conservation journey, which actually began 30 years ago, I would say, when I set up a wildlife club in high school. So I talk about that because I believe that, you're never too young to lead conservation efforts. I did it when I was 18 years old, and I believe even when you're younger, you can do it. And I want to encourage young people out there that they can become, conservation champions and entrepreneurs at a very young age and make a difference. And then I also talk about, other experiences I had, including my first job as the first vet for the Uganda Wildlife Authority, essentially the first full-time Ugandan wildlife vet in the country, and how that was a very interesting job, even just getting people to understand why a vet is important for wildlife in itself. And then, then how we set up conservation through public health and all the different activities we've been doing. And I also talk about how we're sustaining conservation through responsible tourism to great apes. For example, these two are policy briefs that we've developed recently, and they were launched at the first IUCN Africa Protected Area Congress in Rwanda in July. And it's considered both in English and French, because the 21 countries where great apes are found are mainly Anglophone and Francophone. And of these, 13 have great ape tourism, of which Uganda has the most amount. And countries like Guinea-Bissau have a small amount, chimpanzees. And we want to encourage everybody who's traveling to see these great apes to become a responsible tourist. One who is willing to put on a mask, willing to maintain a distance from them and respect them, and also, so that they don't make them sick. They should be aware that they could make them sick, but they should also be aware that they can actually help to become conservation champions or gorilla champions by being able to not only visit them and pay money, but being a responsible tourist. But when they also visit them, they should visit the local communities who share their habitat. And it could be something like buying their crafts or going to their entertainments and giving money, and also going on community walks, buying coffee, going on a coffee safari whilst they're in Windy, on other places. So for the tourists to know that it's not enough just to see the gorillas, they should also visit the communities, because when a community member meets a tourist, they really feel like the gorillas are important. Even just the porters, some tourists come and they feel like, I don't need a porter, I'm really fit. And or some of them feel, oh, maybe getting a porter, I'm uncomfortable, I've never had a porter in my life. But just letting them know that actually when they hire a porter to carry their bag to the gorillas, they're contributing to the local economy, and they're reducing the need of someone to enter the park to poach. You could find that porter's father is a reformed poacher, and as long as his son is bringing money home, he'll keep out of the forest. But if his son is no longer bringing money home, he'll go back inside and poach. And so this makes a huge difference to the local communities.
Yeah, that's very nice. Thank you so much, Doctor. As we are winding this up, any last words to the people that have been watching the live stream? Anything that you would want to say as we close this live stream?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you all so much for following us, for supporting us in so many ways, so many encouraging words. When I was in Rwanda just a few days ago, I met two operators there, tour guides, and they said, we're really proud of what you're doing a great job. And they had taken tourists both in Uganda and Rwanda. I think it's so important. Those words of encouragement enable us to work harder to protect the gorillas, but also to tell people out there that they can be gorilla champions. They can make a big difference to conservation. And I hope you all get to enjoy reading my book. My son actually, Indigo, wrote a book about his experiences here at UWEC. And that book is available on Amazon, and it's also available in the bookshops in Uganda. My book will also be available it's actually already available on Amazon in the UK and the US. People can order it, pre-order, it's already being pre-ordered. And it will also be available in Uganda eventually. And also my mom's book, I took her to see the gorillas when she was 70. And she has in her book a photo of us together with the gorillas.
Wow.
Really amazing. So I just want to encourage you all to be prepared to continue to conserve our precious gorillas here in Uganda. We're very privileged to have gorillas in our country, and mountain gorillas. And they actually happen to be in UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So as much as they're very important to us locally and nationally, but they're also important globally. And we all have a responsibility to protect very important species so that they can continue to increase in number, reduce the threats of disease, habitat loss, poaching, see how we can expand their habitat so that the numbers can continue to grow and we can continue to benefit from gorilla conservation. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor. And we also want to thank everybody that has joined us on the live stream. In case you want to get more information, like the doctor said, you can always go to ctph.org, that is ctph.org, and get to know more about conservation and conservation through public health in particular. My name is Tumusiime. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you so much, Conan.